Good afternoon, and welcome to Gator's Garage, the place to come to find out news about all things Gator and spend a few minutes talking about some element of the hobby. Last week we talked about this Chorus War, which we're pretty excited about. This week we're going to kind of pivot into one of my favorite areas, and that's talking about terrain. The genesis of this particular episode goes back many years when I went to a friend of mine's house to play a game of, I think it was Lord of the Rings miniature battles. And this guy had probably two armies for Lord of the Rings, two 40K armies. I think he even had a War Machine army. So probably $2,000 worth of miniatures even back then. I mean, hobby has never been very cheap. But when I got to his house to play, and I told him, I said, "Hey, do I need to bring terrain?" "No, I'm fine." So we got there to play, and his terrain consisted of a rough felt mat, uh, a hill which was broken in half, and so used to make two half hills on the edge of the table, and I think maybe some flock and maybe some scattered terrain for walls. Just very, very minimal. And I was just like, wow. Love my buddy to death, but I was just like, you spent all this money for all these good looking minis and you not invested anything into your tabletop. Now some people might say, well, I play at my local club. That can be fine, especially if you play a lot of the gothic sci-fi or you play a lot of the gothic fantasy. But for those of us that play historicals and some of the harder sci-fi, um, the terrain look of our tables is going to be a little different. I know I've played up at a couple of our local stores here, and God bless them, they've got a good offering of terrain, especially if you play again gothic sci-fi or even Star Wars. But boy, if you're playing historicals, you're probably not going to quite get the same feel as you would if you brought your own terrain and built your own board featuring, historical theme, historical looking terrain. Now, all that being said, we're going to look at a variety today, a little bit of science fiction, but mostly we're going to look at items that would relate well to historical terrain. So, with all that being said, let's start our discussion here. Terrain. It's an important part of your table story. Did you know that? Not only do your miniatures tell a tale and your players, but also your table. It tells its own tale. And the tale that your table tells to you and your players is absolutely determined by the amount of care that you put into your terrain. Now, you can throw just some rocks and trees and a couple of books under a sheet and call that good. And maybe when you're first starting out, or if you just wanted to, do a quick test drive on a game, that might be all right. I know my wife and I, some of the skirmish games we've tried out, we've just used a 3x3 mat, but we've still put good looking terrain on there to, again, capture the feel and tell the tale. So, start off with probably some of the easiest stuff, and it's getting more and more prevalent in the hobby, is 3D printed terrain. Now, I've I've seen a lot of 3D printed armor in the Warlord game space and in the bolt action space, but 3D terrain is another area that we're starting to see grow and crop up and expand for the gamers, and for the very same reason. Of course, this used to be a resin. The if you weren't buying from the big companies, you were buying resin cast, and I have a number of resin cast items in my collection. I've got a buddy of mine who does resin casting, and he often will share with us things that we then take and paint. But so resin casting is slowly giving way to 3D resin printing. What you see here is from Panhandle 3D LLC. They were a company that were recommended to me by Brian Strout, who runs 3D printing for gaming. If you've ever been at any of the southeastern Florida cons and seen the guy with all the sci-fi buildings and maybe a few mechs and a few science fiction tanks and 6 mil, yeah, that's our buddy Brian. And I said, "Hey Brian, who do you recommend for 3D printing terrain?" He said, "Man, I learned from these guys over here at Panhandle 3D LLC, and they're a good source." Through their catalog and just pulled a few things here that that I think really would be useful in, again, more of a historical. You've got some wooden slash grass huts there. Be good in the outline. Also be good for core. Our favorite, our newest favorite sci-fi game. A couple of resin printed market stalls. If you're fighting in the city, you're going to be fighting in, and finally an outdoor market stall. So some nice things. And 3DLC is certainly not the only ones out there doing 3D printed terrain, but they're certainly a fine example, and I'm happy to feature them. Again, resin has some advantages. It's going to be in just a few pieces. It's going to need some treatment. You need to maybe sand a little bit to rough the edges. Definitely need to wash it, but that's true of any medium that you go to paint. And then put a good base coat of paint on there. Most of the time, though, I've generally found that resin terrain takes paint very well, is very durable, and is going to handle the vagaries of traveling and gaming. And again, the idea here is to build up a terrain kit where you can either take your a part of your collection somewhere and play, or take one or two buildings and your buddy bring a couple three buildings or trees or whatever, and you build the table together. We actually do that for our Flames of War group. Everybody brings usually about a table's worth of terrain, and whoever gets there first will usually throw a group on the table. Now we're playing at a local shop, Savannah Lion Games. They're gracious enough to host us, but their terrain is predominantly science fiction. So to get the theme and the feel that we want for Flames of War, especially World War II, we're usually going to change that out a little bit. So the next element, and I'm just been really excited about this particular line of terrain here, and actually Gator sells this. It's called the World War II Normandy line, and I wasn't quite sure what to make of it when it first came out. And then I bought a piece and looked at it, and how well made it was. I'm like, wow, this is really worth having. So you have the resin that comes out of the box pretty much ready to play, except you got to paint it. Well, this printed MDF terrain is the exact opposite. It's ready to go as far as painting. You just got to put it together. And if you ever put MDF kits together, they're generally rather fiddly. They've got a lot of pieces and bits, but they do reward careful handling. So this is the World War II. What we're going to go through in the next couple, 3 or 4 slides, is the World War II Normandy restaurant, which is available on our website, and just look at how it can really add some elements. We're gonna get about halfway through assembling it in this look, but just kind of give you a feel for how, especially this terrain. But again, any terrain can add literally depth to your gameplay, and again, to the story that your tabletop is telling. We run a number of tournaments here in Savannah, and one of the comments we always get is how good the terrain looks, and that's because we take each table and have it tell its own tale. Not We don't do a lot of generic vanilla tables there. They each have a particular theme, and here these Normandy pieces fit very well into anywhere in Northwest Europe, and some of the pieces would even fit well with moderns and even science fiction. So here's the opening. There's a cover sheet. It comes with instructions. Comes with both MDF and acrylic printed, or I guess acrylic printed windows. So you're actually going to have glass looking windows on this when it's done, which is pretty cool. As you might imagine a little bit of a challenge to put together, but not bad. So here I am, yours truly, working on putting some windows in, both the front windows for the restaurant as well as some of the side windows. One of the things we discovered is that you really want to use, you don't want to just put that window on a flat surface and set it. You really want to use your hands to make sure you've got a good fit. The pieces do fit very closely, but you want to make sure that you're sitting clearly and cleanly in the window. So when you put these windows in, really had a good time putting this together last night with my wife. Um, so here we've got it. We've made progress on the assembly. Now you'll notice the ground floor on these kits, and this is true for all of your big building kits. When they're destroyed, and Bolt Action has rules for blowing up buildings. It's kind of funny. Randy lost a whole squad of Gurkhas last weekend at our monthly event. They were all dug into a building, and Chris, running the Italians, brought up a medium howitzer and blew it apart. So yeah, it went from looking like this to looking like this. This one is nice because, as you can see, The building goes on over the rubble terrain, and once it's over the terrain, you really can't tell from the outside that there's rubble inside it. You go to look inside, of course, you've got the rubble, but that also serves to make rooms as well if you wanted to divvy the rooms up. So now we're working on the second floor. Again, this particular brand, especially, notice they not only paint the outside, but the inside is very well done. This is the second floor. It's got wallpaper, it's got laminate flooring, or it's got probably what would be hardwood given the time period. So it's really good looking. You can see clearly here the contrast between the inside and the outside. The outside wall looks weathered. The inside is a clean wallpapered session. Yes, I put every one of those windows in, but again, not too hard to put together. Not bad at all. So here it is. We've got it together. We've got the first two floors together. We've popped a roof on the outline on the entryway here, and then we've got our second story building up here. Now this will be a 3-story build, and we were just at 10:30 at night. We were pretty much done with playing with MDF for a while, so we kind of left it there. We're going to finish this up probably tonight or tomorrow night, but it's at 2 of 3 levels now, and there are stairs marked in the building as well, so you can go up and down the stairs. And again, if it takes too many artillery hits, you can always condense it back down to its rubble. The next thing to look at is just your classic terrain kits. We've seen these for years from Warlord, from Games Workshop, from I don't know if Wargames Atlantic has done any terrain kits, but the plastic terrain kit is just it's been a staple of the hobby for years, and nothing wrong with it. Again, um, easy to put together, easy to paint. Takes here we have what's called this is the Ruin Hamlet kit from our own stock, and here they've made 3 different, they're essentially the same model, but they've made them look a little bit differently by varying your paint scheme. And because these are loose, you can mix and match them as well. I tend to put mine on bases, which makes it a little bit easier to tell where the rubble ends and where the table begins. But classic here, again, if you're looking to build your terrain collection, you're probably gonna add some of these as well as some of the other things that we've shown you. And there's nothing wrong with having mixed media terrain on your board. It's your board. The important thing is that you have a board that helps evoke, the feeling of the game. The last thing you want is something that's either too light on terrain, there's not enough cover, or too heavy that you can't get anything done, or you know, frankly, you don't want to play bolt action if you can help it with heavily gothic themed sci-fi or fantasy terrain. You want the stuff that looks pretty much in period. So the other way to go is handmade terrain. Now, Randy Yan built the board for our recent Karen 10 game. If you follow our blog and follow us on Facebook, you'll have seen some write-ups on this. But Randy built this by hand, including the duck board you see. Took him quite a while. Fantastic board. The sandbags are removable. He made those by hand using modeling clay. So really intense and impressive piece of work. The greenery that you see there was all built by hand by him and is totally removable from the board, so the whole board can be stacked and then carried to the next fun gaming event. But he really did a good job here, and don't be shy to try your hand at taking some insulation foam and making your own terrain, or carving in roads, carving in washes. I mean, there's just a number of things you can do. And this is one way to make a gaming table. Now, this one's pretty set as far as what it can accommodate. You can other ways I've seen 3D tables like this done. I've seen them done as multi-part, where the different parts are geomorphic and you can run them together. But we have been playing on this board for probably 6 years, and it's always a good game and always a lot of fun. Here's some more work. You can see where the Randy's got the guns properly dug into the gun pits. They've got sandbags covering the backside, which you frequently would see in a battery situation. The guns, by the way, are 3D resin prints that Randy had done by a friend of his. Over here on the lower right, you see a machine gun team that's dug into a sandbag position that's covering part of the interior of the base. The Americans are coming in from the other end. So again, your terrain. can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. And you can choose to either buy your components, again, nothing wrong with that, or make your components. And I've seen some beautiful work. Randy has kit bashed a number of buildings for bolt action, and they look fantastic. I'd stack them up against anything coming out of any shop anywhere. So the important thing is, and I'm hoping the takeaway here that you'll have after today is, hey, I want my boards when I put them together to tell a good story. Other terrain ideas, we have MDF houses over on the left-hand side. So these are just houses that come in general MDF kits, and then you paint them yourself. The track there in the middle of the table, by the way, is a resin printed tank from Tina's Tiny Tanks. I think it's standing in for an LBT that Randy accidentally left at home. So yeah, it's using the LBT stats, but we won't tell anybody. There's a resin printed Jeep behind this MDF house. So there's again the hobby's changing, and we have options and access to a lot more items than we did even just 5 years ago. The middle is what I'm calling a mixed media. It's a plastic GW kit with dollhouse bricks. Honestly, that's from my old Lord of the Rings collection. I chose to take the two pieces of terrain that came in their starter box and turn them into rubbled houses. I think I've got three or four of those because I bought like four of the original Lord of the Rings starter kits. They were a fantastic deal back in the day. You've got 40 figures and a rule book for like $40, and you just even back then you couldn't beat that with a stick. And I've always been a big fan of Lord of the Rings, so that wasn't a hard sell. The other thing you see here is some homemade foliage stands. These were made by both Randy Yon and Jim Casey. Um, Jim does a lot of terrain for our club. A lot of the big, elaborate tree stands that you may see in our after action reports were built by Jim, but Randy's done a lot of work on his own as well. And here they're playing on one of the boards. Actually, this is the game that Randy and I played later Saturday. His anti-tank rifle got I think we figured out a 1 in 3,000 shot to take out my armored car and to give him the win. So bitter? No, no, not at all. But seriously, the terrain is what you make of it. You can add, again, whatever elements you have. This presentation really does scratch the surface. I know my wife likes to come in and add, she'll add random rock scatterings to kind of, break up the field and make it look even more varied as far as field composition. You might come in and add wheat fields, and those can be either they can be built. I know Jim has made some wheat fields for us, or you can take carpet matting and cut that up into wheat fields, and it provides good area terrain to provide some light cover as your guys are moving behind it or through it. So the sky's the limit. Just kind of think about, for your first board, where do you want to put it? Do you want to put it in Northwest Europe? Do you want to put it in Italy? Do you want to put it in North Africa or Tanzania? I guess North Africa would be pretty easy. You could just come up with some sand dunes and a couple of oases, although even for North Africa, I tend to go a little heavy on the terrain and add a lot of standing palm trees and broken rocks to provide cover. Or you could go to the South Pacific and do a jungle board. And those are the jungle boards are their own special brand of fun because they're dense. You're going to want to use a lot of plants. You can either use hobby plants, or some of us will use like I use some fake house plants that I found at Michael's and Hobby Lobby, cut them up, and I've achieved some very good success. So, I would challenge you. I hope I've inspired you a little bit here. I'll challenge you, if you don't have terrain, before you buy that next army, buy some terrain and think about what world or what section of the war that you would like to uh, have an adventure in or play a game in, and start building that with an eye toward having a board that tells the type of terrain tale that you find most engaging. Terrain, it's an important part of your table story. And like every other part of our games, the how the stories go is up to us the players and us the game masters. And I hope I've given you some ideas. If you've got any comments or questions, feel free to um, drop them in the comments below. Also, I will put links for these various items the two items that Gator sells, as well as a link to 3DL, to their 3D printing site in the comments of in the comments after this video. And I just hope you found this interesting. If you have any questions, please drop them in there or send us an email on our website. If there's an item that you'd like to see us cover, just give us a shout. Quite honestly, we're going to cover new things, of course, but we're going to go back and cover some of the old stuff too. You can look to see us. We'll be doing some more on Black Powder, but on the new side, we'll be doing some more on Hail Caesar. Uh, our next week's episode is planned to be a discussion of some of the most commonly misunderstood rules for Bolt Action version 2. And you might say, well, gee, it's going away. We'll be playing version 2 at least through the beginning of Q3. So it's always helpful to have a good understanding of what you're playing and what you're learning. I'm going to thank you for your time. I know time is precious and valuable. I hope you found this video useful, and I hope you'll come back to Gator's Garage next week and talk with the Gator. We'll talk to you later. Thank you for your time. Bye bye.